Hello, ExiledSurfer. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, it's totally fucking awesome to join you guys, man. Like, we've known each other tangentially for fucking years, man. Like, and now doing this new project. So I'm really stoked to be here with you, man.
Super cool. It's really awesome. And like we have had this kind of satellite connection for a while.
Yeah.
And now we're here at Dark Prague, the Dark Prague Year Zero.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty big deal. What do you think of the event so far?
So I'll go back further, actually.
Please do.
So last year, we shut down 11 years of HCPP, right? And it was a really emotional moment, because we'd gone through a lot of financial and interpersonal turmoil in the house, over a number of years, right? And was the house going to keep going? And, was the event going to keep going once it was clear that the house was going to stay and whatever? And, so people really, felt it last year, like it was the end of something. But we closed the event with, I brought everybody up on stage who spoke last year and, asked everybody if they were going to, continue to participate with us and keep the cypherpunk, dream alive. And people were like, yeah. And so this year, we finally, very late, which is typical, came up with the concept, what was it going to be called, and put out a call for proposals. And this year's program is an incredible mix of the people that have been, sharing their ideas and conversations here for the, over the last decade, and a completely new group of people, right? And so I was really excited to see what came in, and it's a wider and broader program this year than we've had, and that's intentional. So we've kind of like been able to free ourselves from the chokehold of our own creation, right? So the crypto anarchists and the cypherpunks and sort of like the chain tribalism, right? Bitcoin started out in the house, but we were the first ones to embrace Litecoin, which was incredibly contentious. You can imagine the debates in the house because that was really shitcoin time, right? Mm-hmm. First ones to embrace Monero, right? And then eventually invite Ethereum in the house. But all of those things were, involved a lot of very, very emotional, debates between people who are very passionate about, like what's right for the space or what's right for the world, right? And now, sort of that sort of those purity tests, have disappeared, right? Mm-hmm. So the people that represented, that really hardcore belief in the core tenets of the one or the other chain, is gone, and it allows a lot more space for the broader intellectual, discourse about what's going on right now, what excites people, which brings us a lot closer, to the old hacker and maker culture, which was represented by the early hacker spaces like CCC in Berlin and Noisebridge and in San Francisco and MetaLab in Vienna, right? And so it's really nice to have a certain amount of programming freedom again, and also because everything has become so contentious in the world and in the space, right? People, the borders have hardened, right? And people, are doubling down on what they think is the right solution, right? And we have this incredibly, aggressive inability to talk with people across the aisle politically or socially or whatever, which is reflected in the tribalism in crypto, right? And so being freed from that with a completely new issue, right? And a new future is really cool. Yeah,
I'm loving the history here. It's very clear that you go back in the hacker culture and in HCPP, Paralelní Polis.
Well, I go way earlier than that, right? So I was born in 1963, right? I went online to get an email address when it was ARPANET. So I've been here, digitally in cyberspace, natively since, about as early as, yeah. So I have a long perspective, and so hacker culture or maker culture is quintessentially American, right? like repurposing things, car culture, all of that physical stuff. I mean, we had Radio Shack when I was a kid, right? You go and you get all the parts and you put together a ham radio, so hacking and making, and being physical about the tools it is that you use, and then how that went over from the analog world into the digital world. Yeah, I've been around for a long time, right?
And active.
And so, hacker culture, in the electronic sense, it was just something that wasn't really a big step for me, but for most people, right? As they come into it with successive generations, So, yeah, I have a little bit of perspective.
So hacker culture.
Yeah. So I mean, I never really saw. So through all of these decades, yeah. I haven't really seen much difference between, beatniks, hippies, punks, cypherpunks, anarchists, crypto-anarchists, burners. They're all just sort of the same thing for me with different clothes, right?
Awesome. So what is the common thread between these?
The common thread is curiosity. The common thread is definitely curiosity about the world around you, and empathy for other people, right? Or for even a non-personalized, cultural artifact, right? So it's always it's a form of art and poetry and, engagement with the world around you and reflecting the world around you and being involved and present in the world, right? With definitely, a small, with combinations of messianic, passion, right? To do something for the world and for other people, yeah. A combination of that and genuinely, I think, a care for people, and then maybe a little small or larger portion of autism.
Right. Yeah. There's a touch of that.
Right.
But the curiosity. This reminds me of a quote by Aaron Swartz that he said that what most people consider to be intellect or intelligence really boils down to curiosity. Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, Aaron Swartz, met him through Lawrence Lessig when Lawrence Lessig started the Creative Commons. So I was like, in the group of Cory Doctorow and all the people around Creative Commons at that time, and the old school guy Dave Weiner, who had written the original RSS protocol, and Aaron Swartz came along and really made it usable, right? And then what happened at MIT, right? So I was involved with Meredith Patterson, who was married to Len Sassaman, and at that time, and Zuko, who was working on latex and all of those things, and then Cynthia Cohn, who just stepped down from the EFF. We all got together and worked together on Aaron's Law after he had committed suicide, right, and stuff. Yeah. So I mean, if I take that one individual, right, I could say that individuals like that have been present always across, in the landscape of my life, right? They just naturally appeared on my horizon because I was a curious person, right? And I remember sitting in this studio 3 or 4 years back and being interviewed by somebody, and they said, "Wow, you're such an amazing presenter and talker and interviewer. Like, why?" And I was like, "Man, I'm just a curious kid." And here at Polis, for me, right, my food, my nourishment, my nutrition is the fact that I get to be a kid. I get to come here and sit with smartest people that you can imagine from, crypto, but other areas as well. And I get to sit and just ask questions. I get to be a kid. And so that's the energy of the house here, and there's no difference in that and in all the cultures, subcultures that it is that I mentioned, is a curiosity and a desire to be, around people, and also a lot of, I guess, you can talk about it from a sense of freedom as well, right? These are all like freedom loving, independent, self-reliant, sort of groups of people. I mean, the do-it-yourself ethic of punk is not really any different than a maker, 3D maker culture, right? Just a little bit different technology, but the desire there is the same: is to understand how something works, right? So that you can use it as a tool to express yourself in the world, right? Punks did it in one way, makers do it in another way, crypto anarchists do it in another way, burners do it in another way, right? Beatnik poets did it in a different way, the hippies did it in this way. And, so like all of that culture is literally the native culture of the internet. I come from California, right? So who built the internet? Acid-taking fucking hippies, man.
It's true.
Steve Jobs and the Woz, I mean, and huge amounts, huge swaths of the programming people or whatever were people of this nature and this bent who, used chemicals, to explore their own sense of self, right, and to have their own sort of like, self-realization sounds too mystical, but self-manifestation in the world, right? These are classic, California hippie culture era things that led to the internet with Stuart Brand, Whole Earth catalog, right, and then the Well, and all of these things, and so Polis, and now Second Culture, as we're calling it, in this generation, is just a natural place for me because it's the same as like the environment that it is that I grew up in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So your involvement in Paralelní Polis and now in Second Culture, tell me about like what your role is, starting with HCPP. Like, when did you get involved with it, and what has your role been through the years?
So I mean, 2014, 2015, back in the day. So in 2013, I started working with the Bitcoin Foundation, and so I was a system administrator and the brand manager and community manager at the Bitcoin Foundation, and we were a small group of people, a guy named Mike Ogulski, and a programmer named Yasha Ehrenreich, and then a guy named Vinay Gupta, who was later went on to be the launch manager for Ethereum. We had a project called Bitcoiners Without Borders, right? So it was, Doctors Without Borders, like it was kind of like a logical thing. Bitcoiners Without Borders for this borderless currency we started. And so Mike Gugulski introduced me to Amir Taki at the time, right? And that's when Amir was doing Dark Wallet and with Vitalik and Mihai from Bitcoin Magazine and Ethereum. So like Mike introduced me to those people, and Michael was an American who renounced his American citizenship and burned his passport, and he has a blog called nostate.com, and he lived in Bratislava, and I met Michael, and he joined as the PHP programmer, Bitcoins Without Borders, and he's the one who brought me here to Polis because he was a speaker here in the early days as an anarchist, and that's when people like Arto Bendikin were here, and Jörg Platzer, right? And Jörg Platzer was really tight with John Matonis of the Bitcoin Foundation, right? So there was like all of these interlinking things, and it was just like a step from Vienna for me to come to Prague because we have the hackerspace there, MetaLab, right? And I'd been going to CCC for years, which is where all the WikiLeaks connections were from when Julian presented WikiLeaks at CCC, and Jacob Appelbaum did his artistic residence with Monochrome in Vienna, right? So there was just all of this. There's all of this pollination, cross pollination through the hacker and computer, and maker scenes that just sort of like landed me naturally in the crypto space, right? And then this was the place in Europe where it was happening. It was pre-Berlin, pre-Ethereum. So this is the first early Bitcoin meetups were here, and Andreas is coming here, and Peter Todd, and and Eric Lambroso, and right. So yeah, I just came here as an attendee in that time.
And it started in 2013 was the first HCPP?
2011, I think, is when we... Wait. Yeah, 2013. 2013, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Or 12? Fuck, I can't remember.
Yeah, but something like 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
And so that people understand HCPP and partially why it is that we changed the brand and the reason. So HCPP stood for Hackers Congress Paralelní Polis. And that's a huge mouthful, right? And so everybody always said HCPP. And what do you hear when I say HCPP? You hear HTTP, right? Or HTPP,
right.
like you hear something that's not, right? And so the reason it was called Hackers Congress Paralelní Polis was to differentiate itself from Hackers Congress from CCC, right? So every year there's the Hackers Congress, which started in Berlin, and then it moved to Hamburg, and then went from Hamburg to Leipzig, and then from Leipzig back to Hamburg, right? So HCPP, Hackers Congress Paralelní Polis, was, to differentiate from the hacker culture of the hacker spaces, because even though both MetaLab and CCC and to an extent Noisebridge were right at the beginning. Obviously, all the computer nerds were right there when the white paper was released and talking about this stuff. The hacker and maker culture was incredibly leftist, right? And very, very critical of all the issues about Bitcoin that people, who criticize Bitcoin, right, have been. And they sort of like rejected crypto, right, the hacker spaces. So this was the place where hackers, came, and anarchists, right? And then, then the libertarians showed up, right? And then it sort of like became this crypto anarchist like sort of thing. So there was a progression in these very, very subtle differentiations between the different subcultures of activism and how they intersect with technology. Yeah.
This is very much the cultural history of Bitcoin as well, starting with the hackers, the tinkerers, and like you said, like Noisebridge and CCC were very much against it on a principle level because it's money, and this is not what they're interested in.
Yeah.
They're about like tinkering with things and building things and making things. But there was a certain group within that within those hacker communities that thought that
which were running Bitcoin nodes, and then we were having arguments about the power use in the house, right? Because it's a collective space and you're mining Bitcoin, sort of shit, right?
Yeah. And the libertarians, the crypto anarchists,
they showed up later. The libertarians showed up
come in and filter in as the price started going up.
Yeah. So like the earliest, the first people that I met, like outside of let's say hacker and maker and computer nerd culture, that were involved with Bitcoin were either physicists, people who are into physics, professors, students, whatever, and poker players, right? And the earliest people who capitalized on this were, the Ukrainians, the Russians, right? Because they were running all of the streaming portals, the BitTorrent clients, right? And all this stuff is all intersected with, with digital rights management, right? MP3, right? And BitTorrent, right? And all of these things. These are all fuck, man, it's just so amazing to have actually met all of these legendary people, right? Just because I was coming to spaces like this where, nerdy people were talking about the shit that they were doing amongst their peers and flexing their code base or whatever in all of these areas. It's been an amazing, cultural progression and, all the personalities and intelligence across that. It's been amazing to see. So it's kind of hard to divide between all of these things for me. Right, and I guess maybe that's why it is that people see me as a storyteller or as a historian, because I've been involved with so many of these different things that are not really different for me, but for other people are very, very different and very, very distinct. And my talk today is actually, goes through the history of a lot of these things. Anonymous and Occupy Wall Street and anarchy and libertarianism and all these things, and how they're intersected and how they find their expression in cryptographic monetary protocols. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, it's like you said, it's this curiosity, this thread of curiosity that takes you through. And then you go to in-person events, you go to the communities, and you have immediate access to these people who are famous in their own right. And they're amazing engineers or philosophers and thinkers, and you have a chance to really learn from them, work with them, and they learn from you as well.
And so there's a secondary side to it, which is the technological and artistic and creative side of what it is that you do, right? So I rode that wave as well, right? And so as a podcast, so I have the first video blog on Apple Music, right?
That's amazing.
And so I grew up doing this, with the technology natively of being able to do audio, video, and stuff on computers. They enabled me to do these things, right? And as a creative, then I became, a podcaster, a journalist, and I did the same thing that you're doing, right? Which gives you, I have great stuff on my Vimeo channel. I have interviews with Daniel Domscheit-Berg, with Adrian Lamo, the guy who turned in Chelsea Manning, who was like, I did the interview, I did a screen capture of it with a fucking Skype call, on my laptop. Classic. And I just screen captured it, and that's up on Vimeo of Adrian Lamo, just like 2 weeks after he turned in Chelsea Manning, and we all found out that he was that he had turned and gone to the FBI, right? And so all of this technology, right, I've had hands-on, and so that was my entry into the space, was being a creative and using these tools, to do my own creative expression, right? And then using them to be, to do podcasting, right? I mean, I had so before Twitter, when we were all doing blogs and RSS feeds and whatever, I had an aggregation website called unmediated.org, which is no longer online, which is a really real shame, that I worked on together with Alex Stamos, who later went onto Facebook, and Kenyatta Cheese, who's like really core in the electronic activism area in New York. And we had this blog called Unmediated, tracking tools for decentralizing media, right?
Super cool.
And so so we were aggregating all of the cool nerd blogs, right, and reblogging them. So there was this software called Reblog, which was written simultaneously at the time that the wikis came out, right? So and Wikipedia was starting. So just as being a curious person and wanting to be able to, growing up with the technology of the web, I was just always around these nerdy programmers, right? They were like, okay, well, what do we want to do? We want to do this. And it's like, you got together for a few weeks and, you launch something that was buggy and you put it out among your friends and people are like, oh, this is cool. You know what I mean? And then other people gather around it, improve the code base and whatever. At some point that became startup culture, right? At some point that grew into like crypto. And, it was all just sort of like a natural progression that just happened around me because of my curiosity and the other people's curiosity, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
and so anyway, being a podcaster, an interviewer, and then being in these movements and, was also a way of being educated, right? So I've got the camera, right? I know you know exactly what I'm talking about,
We
right?
have so many parallels. Like,
Right?
I'm also from California. I grew up with dial-up BBSs, like running my own back in the day. I worked on Bitcoin Magazine as the web developer with Mihai and Vitalik. You're talking about the Bitcoin Foundation. I was like right there following along. I've met and worked with most of the people that you're naming, and then because of my curiosity, I started going to Bitcoin meetups and decentralized tech meetups in like 2012. And I'm looking around going, why is no one recording this? I know how to record stuff. I went to school for media, so I start showing up with my camera. And then live streaming was just starting to happen at the same time. And so like I have everything from Bitcoin to mesh networks to Ethereum. I live streamed Vitalik at the Internet Archive back in 2014, presenting Ethereum for like one of the first times. And like my friends are sitting here going like, you must know all about this because you're the one with the camera. You're showing up and you're, when you're working on the camera, you're not always paying attention to what's being presented. But creating this network and this catalog.
Right, the same thing. And that's the intersection. Here was World Crypto Network, right?
Yeah, also me.
Sat here in this corner. That's still online. So
Yeah.
So that sort of like that intersection between technology, right? Like the hands-on actual, I'm a guy that, run a camera, plug cables in, set up lights, right? Figure out how to stream,
Feed your own curiosity of what is being talked about in the scene.
Yeah. So we share a lot of parallels there about our, in terms of what we know and who we know in this space, right? And everybody looks at you and thinks like, oh, wow, like, fuck, all these people. And you're like, well, no, I've been in the same room with them, right?
Yeah, I just show up.
But they're not like people that, that I know, right? The one or the other one.
Yeah. Some might be friends, but overall, it's like we have the connected nodes in a network, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's.
But and then the power, right? The sense of power that it is that you have as an individual, right? And being active in the world and actually having participated in spreading the mimetic messaging, right, of these cultural things is incredibly empowering, right? And that gives us a sense of confidence that other people, admire or are inspired by. But I think that you probably, like me, feel very humbled by it all, right?
Absolutely. And it's a very self-catalytic system. It's like when we first embrace these events and we first like engage with these networks, then there's a sense of like, do I belong here? There's this imposter syndrome.
The imposter syndrome, right, exactly.
It's very real, and it will last for a really long time. And then eventually you're organizing events, you're up on stage presenting, you're shaking hands and getting hugs from people who others see these hugs happen, and they're like, oh my God, did you just touch that person? And you're like, oh, that's just my friend, Vitalik. Or it's...
Vitalik doesn't really hug, but...
No, but yeah, it's first name to come to mind. But you know what I mean? It starts to create this motivation. And then it becomes easier to engage more and more, and then you inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, and then there's the responsibility that comes along with that, right? And being, let's not use the word influencer, but right. an active person in the space, right? And then you have that sort of that challenge to not become a victim of your own creation, right? And that's the criticism that we level against most podcaster influencers and whatever that become, a slave to their audience, right? And a slave to their success, right? And so, it's really hard to explain to people how you can be involved with this culture for the length of time that we've been involved with it in, and still be just like poor working class dudes who are plugging shit in and fucking lugging their stuff on a plane, or just living hand to mouth, right? Yeah. Even though you've been around it from day one, it's because we just have a different sort of a perspective and a motivation. What feeds us, the payment that feeds us, is satisfying our curiosity and not filling our bank account, right?
Yeah, that's so important. Like, this is that humility that drives forward actual engagement and feeding the curiosity, rather than like trying to drive up audience numbers or getting a paycheck from YouTube or Google AdSense, or becoming this famous figurehead that.
Oh man, I'm so thankful I've never gone viral.
Yeah.
Really? Oh fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm really. I've had a steady, people coming and going. We'll use X as a metric, right? I've had a steady, basically since 2011, between 12 and 14,000 followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And literally everybody that's ever come into this space was Udi Wertheimer, or Nick Carter, or, just like, I could just name so many names that I remember, or what's the crazy Italian dude, Giacomo Zucco, right? Like, I remember all these people showing up, fresh faced and full of piss and vinegar and like young and whatever, and then watch them grow and like become these incredibly popular, like vocal and present, absolutely influencers in the space. And I've watched them change both interpersonally and intellectually and whatever. And I'm incredibly thankful that I've never had that strength of voice and reach, right? Mm-hmm. That I've never actually gone viral in that sense. And I guess the reason for that is that I saw the pitfalls and avoided them very early, because I grew up in fucking Malibu, California, my next door neighbor being Sean Penn and Charlie Sheen down the street. And, right. I saw like the kids that I grew up with going through this as teenagers and young adults, right? So growing up in Malibu and being from a working class family, and not really being part of the media, structure there. Like, and all my friends were in film, so I was like, and they're talking about, okay, I'm flying over here to do this and flying there to do that. And at junior high school, people are talking about whose family's doing what show, like whatever, what I mean? So I was into music because everybody else was into film, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I avoided like fame.
It's a monster.
I avoided fame from a young age because I watched it amongst my peers, how they changed interpersonally with me, or how they, what they went through with their struggles in life. I mean, so I go down to my beach, and Sean comes walking down with his new girlfriend, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Mickey, how's it going, man? It's my new girlfriend, Madonna," and like, I look at Madonna, the first thing I thought when I saw Madonna was, you could drive a Volkswagen van through the gap in her front teeth, like, one of the biggest stars in the fucking world, you know what I mean? Right? And then they got married, okay? And they got married. Their marriage happened at Johnny Carson's house, okay, on Point Dume. So we were on Zoomerez Drive, and Johnny Carson was on Westlake Drive, one street over, so one cove over on Point Dume, private beach, Anyway, so that's where Sean and Madonna got married, was at Johnny Carson's cliffront house looking towards L.A., one cove away from Barbra Streisand's house, okay, which is at the end of our street, right? Man, there were fucking 6 helicopters in the air. You know what I mean? Like the paparazzi around the fucking neighborhood. Okay, man. Like what year is this? Is like 980 something, right? When they
I'm not even sure. Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. No, it's been mid 80s or whatever. Right? It's got to be something like 85, 86, something like that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is like our neighborhood, our quiet, like, okay, yes, privileged enclave, right? There's 6 helicopters in the fucking air. You know what I mean? And like, you couldn't even hear the fucking vows, right? So very early, formative life experience, right? Like, so this hatred for celebrity, chasers and paparazzi and this sort of stuff, right? And how it affects. I mean, everybody in my neighborhood were people that, like, put on their pants, one leg at a time in the morning, and argued about, their dogs shitting on each other's lawns, or whether they were on the leash on the beach. You know what I mean?
Just regular people.
Just regular, totally like normal people that happened to be famous, and just people who went to work, right? So and then like another great story from Sean is like, he was famously prosecuted for beating up a journalist, right? Yeah. So I mean, I went to visit him at his house, and we were sitting there, and he like, oh, I gotta go take a piss. So he goes to the bathroom, and he comes out of the bathroom like pulling up his shorts around his legs, and goes out the house and like streaks across the lawn, and catches this guy and beats the shit out of him, right? Because there was this paparazzi was like in his hedge, and he had a great fucking bathroom with like one of those classic architectural things where you got like 4 panes of 2-meter glass in your bathroom looking out over your view onto the ocean, right? Yeah. You're sitting there in your toilet with your fucking sea view, and you see some guy, with a camera. This is the life of people in Malibu and Beverly Hills, and Hollywood, LA, right? That people on the other side of the fence don't really like see as being just like in complete and total infringement of your own personal space, right?
Yeah. The pitfalls of fame, they're real.
The pitfalls of fame. So I grew up in an area that was full, like on my street, Pierce Brosnan, like I said, Barbra Streisand, David Lee Roth. I mean, the lawyer from Elton John, Johnny Carson, David Letterman, right? The Sheens, Goldie Hawn, Brian Gibbs, Dan Fogerty from the Eagles. Like, I mean,
wow.
and this is
too.
Like Larry Hagman, took me to when a group of kids that got brought home from school by Larry Hagman, from Dallas and
right. Well, and speaking of Streisand's house, this is the house where the Streisand Effect comes from, because there was a picture of the house of her house on Google Maps or something, and she made a big deal and said have it taken off, and that drew more attention to the house.
My street,
your street, yeah,
my street, and then my involvement with Anonymous and LulzSec. At the time, where we and WikiLeaks, where the Streisand Effect try and censor us and whatever. Yeah, it's like fucking incredible. How like wild and incredible and crazy is that in an interconnected life? That
so it helps you keep a level head when you're engaging with these communities that are full of fame chasers.
So I mean, my father was a working class dude from Chicago. And he had a vending machine route, right? So pinballs and cigarettes and candy and Wurlitzers and whatever. And he had machines all over Los Angeles. And so I rode around with him when I was a kid, helping him fill up the machines to the degree that you could do it as a kid, like my summertime, riding around with dad at work, sort of stuff. And when my father was in East LA, he talked like an essay man, And when he was in South Central, he talked with the Bloods. And when he was in Koreatown, he talked like Korean, And when he was in Century City, he talked like the lawyers. And when he was in social services in downtown LA, he talked like the bureaucrats, right? And so my father always met people where they were at in this incredibly diverse, cultural landscape that was Los Angeles. And my dad didn't give a fuck about who was famous, right? And so all the people in our neighborhood thought my dad was fabulous because my dad just met them as people. And if you're famous and rich, you're just always surrounded by people that just want something from you.
Yeah, right? All you want is to be treated like a normal person, and you never get it.
Yeah, and so that was the kind of father that I had, and in the environment that I grew up in, and so that's the blessing. Of my, my own personal story, and you could say personal development or personal self-awareness, was to have been made aware of the trappings, and burdens of fame at a very, very young age, and not being attracted by them. So I was more interested in being behind the camera.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And also it's an interesting point about the intercultural communication that happens in LA. Like you're talking about your dad going between all of these subcultures of the greater LA area. And now on the internet, we have a very diverse multicultural culture. And it's the same, you have being socially aware, being aware, self-aware as well, and being able to interact with these different cultures in a way that meet them where they are and help them feel empowered and help them feel belonging.
And then being a fucking hippie, you know what I mean? Right? Meet people where they're at.
Yeah, it's a very valuable message. And it's definitely one that speaks to this place, to HCPP and to Dark Prague.
And so anyway, my curiosity again, and this combination of meeting people where they're at, is why it is that I moved very early from the warring sort of disempowerment of Bitcoin at the block size wars, right? Was simultaneous when Ethereum happened, and that's where all the dreamers were,
Right.
So it's very natural for me to move into Ethereum and not really see much, difference, right? And not being locked into, the narrative of a single coin. And the same thing, then across as things, moved and developed. I mean, you know this, right? I mean, people forget Ethereum was an ICO on Bitcoin. I repeat this over and over again in this incredibly tribalistic and short-term memory. Bitcoiners funded Ethereum.
Yeah, it was the first ICO.
It was the first ICO.
Mm-hmm.
All of the original core Ethereum people that had crypto or were into crypto and didn't come onto it as computer programmers or other social, roles in Ethereum becoming something, were all Bitcoiners.
Yeah. Yeah, we were the Bitcoin evangelists running around trying to tell people, like, this is more than money, this is technology, and money has always been technology, and be your own bank, all of these messages, the self-empowerment, the self-reliance that you were talking about. Yeah. It was all coming from Bitcoin. And yeah, Vitalik with colored coins as well, like, is really where that fork started to happen.
Right, and then Room 77 in Berlin, right? Jörg Platzer, that I met here, bar, right, is where Gavin. So Amir introduced Gavin to Vitalik because of their DarkFi, their dark wallet, connection, right? And then they sat in Jörg's bar and like really decided to write the yellow paper and do it, and that's where the first place that I spent Bitcoin, right? And the first Bitcoin that I spent, I bought whiskey for Smári McCarthy, who was the Icelandic member of parliament from the Pirate Party,
right,
who was an original member of WikiLeaks, right? And Asta Fish, which was. Those two were Icelandic Pirate Party members, and so and then Birgitta Jonsdottir, who did Collateral Murder with Julian. These are all the people in this incredibly interconnected space, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That also then were the faces, suffered from this sort of the fame of their actions in the world, right? You can really say that to a huge degree, Julian, is a victim of his actions, his fame in the space. A little bit of narcissistic personality disorder too, but along just a little bit. But so all these things, incredibly, to come back to the thing. Incredibly familiar to me from my childhood, and then from the way it is the father that I grew up with, who just met everybody where they're out and never was impressed by, how much money or how much social standing people had. It was just a very American and very LA thing. How do you talk to me as a person, right? Right. It's just something that's got incredibly lost in culture, and that I feel incredibly isolated in. Is like, how do we interact with each other as people? Do you treat me with respect? Do I treat you with respect? What do you bring out in me? What, right?
The interpersonal connections that happen.
Those are the important things. And if you look at the space, if you look at the cryptographic money space, right? There's social money. They're opt-in social consensus rule sets, right? And where it is that they lose that aspect is where it is they lose their power, right? So when it embodies the startup culture, when it embodies the traditional finance culture, you know what I mean? When it touches these other narratives and adapts to these other narratives, is where it is that these systems lose their power and their meaning, right?
Yeah.
They're meant as alternatives, not as we can adapt it, so that it fits in with what people expect, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be mainstream. There's been a lot of narrative about chasing adoption of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah,
it's a very prevailing narrative, and I've always said that mass adoption is the Moby Dick it's this monster that we shouldn't chase, and chances are it's going to kill us if we get there. Like, that's not the point of what we're doing, and that's why Bitcoin maximalism is destined to fail, in my view, because we're about decentralization. That means options.
Oh, you're gonna love my talk at 12, man.
I hope that I can catch it. I'm going to be probably down here recording,
right.
But we are going to also be recording the stages.
Yeah.
So Dark Prague, we're at year 0. Let's bring it back to this event that we're at. Your involvement seems to be historic in this space, and now I imagine that you are looking forward to the future of Dark Prague. Can you tell me a little bit about your hopes and dreams for the event?
So I get to stand on stage and present the event and be social glue here at the event, and I'm involved with suggesting speakers and selecting speakers together with Katka, but it's pretty much she does the majority of that, so yeah, I guess I'm sort of like a fixed point, right? in the event. So what are my hopes for Dark Prague? Well, this year we have an incredible mix of old faces and new faces, and a very, very diverse program that goes back to the roots of where it is that we started, which is art, culture, art, science, and technology was the original sort of like the tripod of Paralelní Polis. And so I'm looking forward to like rejuvenating, so that initial focus that got locked into sort of this crypto area, right? And so we have a track tomorrow. We have a Bitcoin track, right? We don't have a really wider track, and we have the systems track, and we have the exile track, and the BIOS track. So I'm hoping that we can expand this out, into a far more diverse, thematic universe, and inspire new people to come. And it's a very self-selecting event. Once you've been here, once you've been to an event in Second Culture, previously Polis, you recognize it's different than any other event that there is. Yeah. Because there's not much difference between the people who are on stage and the people who are in the audience. As a matter of fact, they're very interchangeable over the years, right? And the audience become our speakers. There's so many people here. Yeah, so
that have spoken at the previous events, and
there's like major people in the space that are in this house right now that came in as like young kids and were like, "Ooh, what's this?" And they were so like uncomfortable, and are now major, major movers in the code base in the space and whatever. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to maintaining that level of intellectual humility, right, and curiosity, hoping that we can still attract people that feel like they're imposters, right? So if you're
interesting,
so if you're smart, that you're smart, but you think other people are smarter, you probably should come here. Please come here.
Yeah. There's something to be said about feeling like you're the dumbest person in the room, when like a lot of folks who come here feel like they're often the smartest person in the room. And you have the opportunity to come to an event like this, and all of a sudden you have this imposter syndrome, which the way that you put it actually sounds like a strength, like imposter syndrome. I've always seen it as like a potential blocker. No, man, imposter syndrome is literally like the best intellectual position to be in. Amazing, super hot take, right? Tell me because if you're worried about your ideas being challenged by people that are smarter than you and know something better than you, but you're still got the balls to get up on stage and do it, that's exactly where it is that you want to be. You want to be in a room of people that will listen to you and engage with you and challenge you on the veracity and the likelihood of your ideas. We had that happen yesterday with one of the speakers talking about blackout, right? And the people engaged and pointed out why it is, fuck, what do you want as a person other than to have a group of peers engage with you and challenge you and keep you sharp on the veracity and implement of your ideas, right? That's where growth comes from, right? That's where growth is, right? So imposter syndrome is being worried about whether your ideas are valid in a room of people that you think are smarter than you, is the best possible place to be, rather than somebody that's going to go, "Oh yeah, you're so right," and oh God, you're so smart, and whatever, right? And so there's this mix of sort of what most people would call antisocial autism, right? So that complete lack of any interpersonal stuff of just like, "No, you're wrong." Well, fuck yeah, forget all the social bullshit. Forget all that stuff. Do I have standing in the space because my ideas are right? That's exactly the ivory tower, tenure, professor, influencer cage, right? So if you want to be intellectually honest, if you want to be a person of humility, right? Building on the shoulders of the giants that came before you and maybe becoming one of those giants, right? We have a civilizational record of autist, imposter syndrome, geniuses across the course of history that thought that they were never good enough, right? And
those are the people that move society forward. I'm sorry, not. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. You're totally right. I would argue that those people that do end up making major changes in society and in humanity, the course of humanity, they wouldn't be able to get to that point unless they were challenged, unless they stepped out of their comfort zone and actually questioned their own ideas, because like we can't have the right ideas out of the box.
So I had to like take my own medicine on this for this year. Like, so normally I have the confidence. I've been doing public speaking since high school, as debate, and I was supposed to go to law school because I'm supposedly a good rhetorician and whatever. I ended up not doing that, but I can command a room, I can command a stage, right? I'm going out of my comfort zone and using slides for the first time. And not just speaking extemporaneously. I'm forcing myself into a corset of sentences and ideas in a very structured slide presentation, this year for the first time, to take my own sort of like medicine, and not allow myself, some the space to like, talk my way out of it, right? So,
and this is today.
Yeah,
this is in like less than an hour.
Yeah,
I guess. Okay, cool. We're going to be recording that, and so your talk will be released before this video before this conversation, because of the flow of things and how content creation works and publishing. So people will be able to check it out. If they're watching this video, then go check out Dark Prague. Look for ExiledSurfer. I'm excited to see your talk. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for allowing me to talk about the blessed life that I've led, and having the opportunity to just share and perpetuate the gift of all the experiences that I've had with amazing people. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure, and it's just an honor to be here, to be allowed to come to events like Dark Prague. We did this at HCPP back in 2017, and
where you been for 8 years, motherfucker?
Well, it was 2017 and 2018 where I did it, and honestly, it was like the Bitcoin maxis during HCPP really kind of like turned me off to wanting to be a part of, and then ICOs, all of that happened, and I was like live streaming and doing all of these recordings, and it just like, do I really want to be publishing this information that was happening? So like I had my own little interpersonal battles going on, but this is like coming back to this event and being at year 0 of Dark Prague is like,
so I mean, come on, man. Honor. Talk about humility. Zero knowledge AV club.
Yeah.
You can look at it in terms of the tech at the moment, right? But you might want to communicate a little bit more that it's not only about the latest layer, that's better than sliced bread,
Yeah, it really is. Like, this is the double meaning of Zero Knowledge Audiovisual Club that we're really leaning into, is this curiosity that you mentioned. Like, curiosity is really a superpower. And if you don't know, like you're talking about imposter syndrome, if you don't know what you're doing,
ask a question, man.
Get in there and do it. Like, get in there, volunteer, ask a question, do an interview with someone, come down to the recording station.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Don't be afraid. Yeah.
No failure is the best fucking teacher, really.
It's absolutely true.
I wish you the best with this endeavor, man, and I hope we see each other again real soon.
Yeah. Where can people find out more? Where can people follow you?
Well, so my big change in life is I just turned 62 this year. I fell in love last year after 3 years after a divorce, and I got a baby coming in November.
Congratulations.
So I'm having a baby boy, my second child, and that's pretty much my focus. I realized actually this year that with the baby coming, that I had two problems in my life. I had two addictions in my life that were not really serving me so well. One of them was Twitter X. I've been terminally online there and elsewhere for like ever. I actually succeeded to reduce my online presence to about 5 hours a week. Now.
That's good. That's a good start.
And stop smoking.
So very good.
So those are my two things. So I'm nesting with my partner, and looking forward to bringing a baby into the world, and looking forward to the chance to be a kid again. And my partner's Russian, so learning another language, keep my brain plastic, another cultural point of view, and then fulfilling the curiosity of this child that's going to be around now, asking questions and demanding, to understand the world around him. And that world is different now than the world it is that I grew up in as a child. So I'm incredibly motivated and excited about the chance to participate in the world through a child's eyes for the third
Beautiful.
time.
Yeah.
So I'm not online that much, but I do post here and there things that I think are important on X. So ExiledSurfer. Same thing on Blue Sky. Those are the two places that I'm present. If you're interested in my historical footage, when this is published, it'll be put in my playlist on YouTube. So ExiledSurfer playlist. If you just search term that, then there's my interviews for the last years. If you're interested in the content, that I've produced, ExiledSurfer, on Flickr or YouTube or Vimeo. Oh shit! You can't even come search for your other people's content on Vimeo anymore, right?
Yeah, there's something like they're switching to just a production studio model,
whatever. So that's the thing. But
cool.
Don't you're not going to be seeing a lot of me online.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really happy for you. That's excellent news.
Yeah. So that's my thing.
Very cool. And then the call to action is come to Dark Prague.
Yeah, come to Dark Prague, man, or come to Pizza Day if you're into Bitcoin, right?
Also happens at Second Culture.
Yeah, it happens here at Second Culture in May. During Pizza Day.
Cool.
So those are the two events. I haven't decided whether I'm doing Proof of Work Summit next year again, which has had 2 episodes that I did together with Bob Somerville. So maybe next year I'm going to do the Proof of Work Summit, which is Monero, Dogecoin, Ethereum Classic, Bitcoin, and Dark uses Proof of Work and whatever. So I might produce another episode of that next year. We'll see how family man I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining. This was really fun.
Amazing.